Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week on the Cyclekart I'm going to make a start on getting the bonnet done. See you in a minute. So I've spent this morning just cutting out profiles for the actual bulkhead for the bonnet former. The front bonnet, most of which will be cut away because of the tank, and this intermediate that has to go in there to support the bonnet where it oversails into that space where the header tank is. So they're all cut and pretty much right for level because they've all got this slope on the cut to take the bonnet. I've also cut two pieces to go that side and that side on top of these, which will take the base of the bonnet sides. So I think I've got enough now almost to assemble the whole thing. What I'm also planning to do is putting some supports in, one at the top. I'll notch those into the framework there and about there either side, so that'll give a bit more support to the whole thing and make it into effectively a box. So we just cut the slots for those and cut them to length, and we can start and assemble it all. Right, so that's got the stringers in. I can now get the bottom rails cut. That's got to be housed out around the middle of the bottom rail. The front and back they'll attach to. All of this will be cut out later on, but we'll worry about that when we've got the strength in it. But I think I'm just about ready now. A little bit of fettling to get some of these slots exactly the right depth. But once that's done, I'll get a piece of Dibond and bend it over roughly to shape, and then we can start and think about fixing it to the framework, and we should have ourselves a bonnet without too much trouble. Right, so I've roughly put the bonnet together with the front and rear panels. I haven't lightened the front one yet. I've taken a lot of material out of this one. I'm not doing this one at the moment because this is where I've effectively got to cut most of this away to get clear the header tank. And then there's the filler cap on top of it. So effectively this probably will only end up with these two side pieces up to that point for those two stringers either side of the centre. But I've got to put in the other piece, which is effectively to carry the bonnet right the way up to as close as I can get it to the header tank. And the only way I can do that really is to sit the two ends on and then just put a straight edge along there and wait until it stops on there, get along a straight edge in, and then that will give me an idea of the positioning that's got to be in. And once we've got that established, we can screw that second one in, and it'll give us a chance to get it fixed. And we can then take a load of material out of that one as well, like that one, and cut the front one down, and then I can get and skin the bonnet. Now I'm not going to glue this at the moment until I've finished, because I want to cut bits out of some of the other pieces, but I'm just getting it pre-assembled, if you like, so that I can make sure it fits, and then we can start and cut out for the header tank and the slats, the diagonal radial slats that come out along the bonnet in this centerpiece. But the important thing to do is to make sure A, it fits, and B, that it's the right shape when it's in its place. I don't usually like screwing into MDF, but in this case, in the centre one, I've got no alternative really. With these pieces I'm screwing through the MDF into the beech, but I think we're okay with that. What that gives me now, I hope, is something which is the same radius pretty much. It's very slightly higher in one or two places, which is fine. I can again just take that little bit of space off it, but otherwise that's fine. That's fine. Drops into that rebate I've left between the Dibond and the top supports. It's very slightly narrower than the bottom pieces, which I wish I could say that was done deliberately, but it's more of an accident than anything. But it's a fortunate accident because it means I can go with the 3mm Dibond. Just get a pin. I can run with 3mm Dibond for the bonnet, and it will fit flush with the existing body line, and at the nose okay, and I think okay there as well. So I'm happy enough with that. That'll give me a bit more rigidity in the bonnet, as long as I can get this Dibond to bend. We'll have to see how we get on with that, but I've already done it with some smaller pieces, so I don't see there's a problem. If not, well, I'm going to have to go for plywood or MDF or something else anyway. But we've got it in, it lifts in and out fine, and then we can fine tune the fit by making sure that whatever we skin it with comes in tight up against the edges. So right, now I've got that done, I can move on, get these slat positions marked on the middle piece, and start and cut out and lighten it the same as I did with this, and then I can cut out for the header tank in there as well. Now I've pretty much put all the structure of the bonnet together, but it's not quite clearing the header tank when I go to put it in, and I can't put it in at an angle, it's got to drop straight in. So I've got to clear it back to these 2 points here, and about 10 or 15 mil in, which means I'm going to lose one of the fixings on the front. But I don't think that's too serious. I think the whole thing's getting pretty solid now, it's all glued up. So I'm just going to mark this all up and cut it out with a little Japanese pull saw, because I can't get in with anything much else. But we'll just take that little section out, tidy it back up, and hopefully it's ready then for a skin. That's it, that should clear now, so just tidy those up a bit, round the edges over a bit, and that's sorted that one. Now for the Cyclekart bonnet, I think rather than Dibond, which I was going to have to go and get, I've got some, I think it's called Foamex. It's like a very lightly air bubbled plastic with plain faces on it that they use again for signs. I picked a large piece up for 25 pence or something in the local scrap store. They were selling everything off at half price and it started only at 50p, so I haven't got a lot to lose. The only doubt I have is to how well it will stick to wood, because it's a very smooth shiny surface. So what I'm going to do is just a test piece on this bit that I've snapped off and just glue a piece of wood onto it, leave it for a day or two and then come back and see how it is after that. I'm just going to rough it up a bit first with a bit of sandpaper just to key the surface of it, and that should help it get a grip. But I'm a little bit sceptical and I don't want to find I've got it all stuck on and then it fails at some time in the future, or it only partially works. So I'm using the polyurethane glue, which tends to bubble up and fill any gaps anywhere. It's quite good stuff, but whether it will do this, I don't know. Could do the new bottle. This one's getting a little bit, it's got an expiry date of September, so it's probably not quite at its best. And then just spread it on there and clamp it up and see what happens. Right, so it's had 24 hours to dry this, so it's time to have a look and see how well or otherwise this does. I can already see that there's a split appearing on there when I flex it that's opening up, so there's obviously not a lot of adhesion, but it does seem probably good enough to hold the bonnet sides. I'll just keep working at it, but that certainly is, yeah, a lot better than I thought it was. It will come away, but I'm having to provoke it very hard. Yeah, I think that's going to be plenty good enough, because it's actually distorting the plastic now on the inside. Maybe that first bit was just not, whether the surface wasn't clean, I don't know, but it really is, yeah, it's broken it rather than come undone. So with a bit of cleaning, I think we're on the road to having the right glue for it, which is something I was afraid of that I wouldn't get. Yeah, that's gone as well. Right, so I'm going to try and get the cladding onto the bonnet today if I can, and it's going to be quite a complicated glue up in terms of not having a lot of time to get the thing sorted. I can clamp it all the way along the one edge, but I really need to be able to wrap it round while it's glued up all the way around like that, and then clamp this other edge. And to do that I really need to know where it lands and get a roughly cut to size. It's going to need to be trimmed later, but if I just mark as much as I can plus a little bit all the way round, I can then get a chance to get it cut so that it's a slightly more handleable piece of plastic. Right, that's certainly got me a piece that's more manageable. If nothing else, it doesn't take up half the shed. Looks like winter is finally starting to get with us. We've had a very, very late Indian summer well into the middle of October. It looks like the rain has come back now. Right, we'll go and get I'll also get the acetone out. It's good for getting this muck off your hands. Should have put gloves on, but there we go. Right, let's go and get the bonnet. Right, well, the heat doesn't seem to have done a lot. The only thing I notice is actually it significantly wants to go bending that way much better than the way I've actually cut it to go, so that worries me even more. But we're too far in now to do much about it, so I need to start at that side. Try not to get it all over me. Like it. Really doesn't like it. Yeah. Hindsight being what it is, I should have definitely rolled this the other way, but I think and it's sliding about. Roughly located at the moment. We'll worry about the rest in a minute. So we're about 5 or 6 hours on. It should have gone now, or if it hasn't, it isn't going to, if you see what I mean. It's either going to go or it's not. So I'll get the clamps off. One shell for the bonnet. So unless something untoward happens in the night, it feels nice, it looks good. I'm happy with that. Right, so it's catastrophe time. I've just foolishly started playing with it. I suppose you've got to learn these things. And I thought I would start, and because there's about 1.5 inches of spare at this end, I thought I'd start and try and cut this out to see how it would work when I put the filler cap in. And it just went bang and ran straight along because it's under so much tension, and it's effectively opened it up into a point, and this is now coming up in the air because there's no support inside it. On the positive front, I've just found that the little hand plane I've got is absolutely ideal for taking this stuff down. There's a lovely cut, so I can get it all trimmed up. If I can get this bit repaired, that now is ideal. I'm going to have to call this a fail, I'm afraid. It's cracking at the slightest provocation. The size of it is right, but it's still, because it didn't bond properly, or I didn't bond it properly at the back, there's a gap there which is pushing the whole thing up far too high anyway. And although I could resolve the issue by lowering it down here, I'm not going to bother because it's so wrong at the front end, and I've got a feeling that the second I do anything with this front end, it's going to go worse. So I think I'm going to leave it at that for the moment and revert to plan A, which was originally to use Dibond and bend it, pre-bend it, which is a much better way of doing it from what I've experienced so far. So we're going to try and carefully prise all this off. Postscript, spool forward 24 hours from when I said I was going to scrap this and go for Dibond. I've just been down to the last, well, the 5th last day at the scrap store that they're going to have, and I found another sheet of this material for £1, and I might give it another go for 2 reasons. Firstly, because it's cheap and I think I can get this off. It might be worth another go, because otherwise it's ideal apart from that bad fit that I got up there. More importantly, I think this time I can do it properly. What happened before was that I bent it that way, and it really doesn't want to go that way very much. I'm trying hard and it doesn't want to go. But if I go that way, it's much more compliant. I mean, it's just bent without any real problem. And I think the problem is there's almost like a grain in it that will allow it to bend better one way than the other. And I think if I do that, it might give me less of a problem at the front end when I come to cut the nose out. So I think I'm going to try and get this off, which shouldn't be a problem because I can get a hacksaw blade in quite easily into the big slot that I've left. And again, I'm going to use a slightly different method to clamp it up. I was using clamps before. I think a ratchet strap around the edge, tightened up, will pull it in better. So I'm going to give it one last go if I can get this off without wrecking the timber underneath. Although it sticks well, and it has stuck well, it is proving a lot easier than I thought to get this stuff off. So hopefully, some of the advantage is that I used the side with the printing on it, and I think it, you can see the tension in it. It's pulling the ink off, but that shows pretty much how it doesn't want to bend even now. And yet, you see, if I'd have gone that way with it, it would have been a lot easier. It's bending much better in that direction. One thing I hadn't appreciated, this business of having grain. So in some ways I'm quite pleased that it's come off so readily, although it did feel pretty well stuck on. So I'm fairly confident that for a long term I might have to put some pins in it, but that is quite satisfyingly easy. Right, that's the last chance saloon for the plastic. I think that's got it pretty well sorted, so we will see how that goes and come back to it in the morning. Okay, next morning, well, just after lunch actually, next day, so we've had nearly 24 hours. Time to strip this off, and it does look at the moment to be more promising as a result, in that I think this end part is much tighter. So it seems to be what I was hoping for. Small gap at the front on that part. On one side, again, this is probably because the taper isn't quite right. Could do with a little bit of wood glue squeezing into there, and then we can clean it up afterwards. But I'm not too distressed by that. That's something I can correct. It isn't that there's a big gap in the other side, so I think that's okay. Most of this we'll just clean off with a sharp knife. Just pick this stuff off so we can get it cleaned up, and then I can go and trial fit it. It will need the bottom edges trimming up first, but I'm going to leave the front and back slightly long so that I can make it work to fit with the bulkhead and the nose cone. What I'm going to do differently this time, and hopefully won't get the same problems, is to not go anywhere near cutting this thing that direction, to do the cutout for the radiator cap until I've stabilised it more. And what I'm going to do for that is to squeeze into there another 2 or 3 layers of this. You know, it will force into there if I cut them the right shape, so that it will force it into the round, the half round shape, and then I can laminate several layers together, and that should stop this flying apart business that we had on the last episode. But let's get on and clean this up, and then I'll just trim it back a little bit at this end. The front end can stay long because I haven't got the nose cone on at the moment, so I think the answer is to trim this back to the bulkhead first, get that right, and then I can worry about the front part later on. Describing the line of the scuttle with a pair of compasses so that in theory I can get a good close fit. I think this is still slightly higher than that, but we'll worry about that later. That's something I can deal with later on. Let's get it flushed up first. Right, that's got the fit pretty much there. I'm very slightly high here, and that's something I need to deal with, and I think probably the only way I'm going to be able to do that is to actually drop the whole of the support structure underneath down here. Just to drop that down a little bit, it'll just slightly lower that side of the bonnet down. It shouldn't have any other effect on anything that I can think of. The side panels will stay where they are, it's just the actual top rail that will drop or be thinned down, one or the other. Or I could thin down the bottom rail of the side piece, but pretty much I'm there with a little bit of fettling. I think we've got as good a fit as we'll get. So we'll move on to putting the supports in the front now and get that ready for its cutting down, but I think I'm going to do that another week. We'll call it a day at that. I think I'm reasonably happy that I've got somewhere today. Right, well that's got the I think a bonnet that will work. I've still got to do some work on the front to stiffen it all up before I take out the cutout for the radiator header tank, but I'll worry about that next time, and then we can move on to things like louvers, getting it tidied up, cleaned up, fitted finally, and connected up to the nose cone. But I think I've got there in the end. It took a bit of going but we've got there in the end, I think. Hope the video was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be doing something different on the Cyclekart. I'll see you then. Bye!